मतलब मेरा सिमुलन दात को 0 है ना जब से हम होते हैं 0 + 0 तो ये डॉट साइलेंट डॉट मल्टीप्लिकेशन
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ibu, punten ini saya pause dulu. Dokter Magesnya belum hadir ya? Ini pause dulu reportingnya.
Oh iya. Lupa nggak ya?
Bu Tri, mungkin streamingnya bisa di off dulu kali ya? Oh iya nih, udah. Sebetulnya untuk slide sudah ada, Bu, sampai lecture 3. Lecture 4 dan 5-nya sepertinya belum terkirim.
Oh iya. Barusan tuh ada tamu dari Pakistan.
Iya, kayaknya salah masuk deh.
Oh.
Untuk UTS.
Ini tamunya Bu Uci.
Enggak. Ibu, untuk UTS maka disesuaikan saja dengan yang biasanya seperti apa ya?
Ya, biasa mungkin materinya dulu ya. Materinya disesuaikan dengan materinya. Nanti kita bikin
Ya.
soal.
Ya, Bu, Dokter Magesnya sebentar lagi datang katanya, sebentar lagi join.
Mahasiswa belum semua ya, Triana? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 udah semua ya?
Gimana apa namanya belajar dari Dokter Mages? Lebih mengerti atau seperti apa? Triana.
Pengalaman baru sih Bu, menyenangkan. Mungkin masih
Kaliannya mah lebih detail, sangat lebih detail. Tapi mungkin ada kendala bahasa juga, masih ada kendala bahasa ya.
Iya Bu.
Ya, jadi anggap aja kita lagi kuliahnya di Malaysia gitu ya, sambil pengalaman baru juga, jadi lebih termotivasi gitu.
Iya, mereka mah serius banget gitu ya. Mungkin nanti kalau kita bisa ketemu lah ya sama mahasiswa S2-nya Dr. Mages ya. Yang di pendidikan kimia. Harusnya kapan gitu ya. Ketemu.
Kita bikin kayak simposium aja gitu Bu, join simposium antara mahasiswa kita dengan mahasiswa itu. Jadi program untuk S2 pendidikan kimia gitu ya, mengundang mahasiswa dari S2 pendidikan kimia di sana, masing-masing menyampaikan proposal penelitiannya seperti apa gitu.
Bagus nih pengalamannya, mungkin bisa di awal-awal mungkin ya, atau program berikutnya.
Ya, tapi ini kenapa banyak ini ya, banyak orang masuk ya?
Dr.
Good
Suzy,
morning, Mr. Jefferson. Yes. Oh,
Dia sudah masuk.
okay. Okay, Dr. Mages. Ya.
yes. Okay.
Selamat pagi, Dr. Mages.
Selamat pagi, Dr. Hernani. Sorry, lewat sikit. Saya ada some connection problem.
It's no problem.
Okay.
Right.
Ya. Oke, mungkin kita bisa mulai saja ya. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi semuanya. Semoga kita semua dalam keadaan sehat ya. Today we're going back to have a special lesson about research method from Dr. Mages. The topic for today is about mixed method ya Bu Hernani ya. We will learn mixed method.
No, Dr. Suzy, it's about qualitative analysis.
Oh.
Okay. All right, so mixed method will be next week. So
Yes.
Alhamdulillah. Berarti kemarin saya tidak masuk 1 hari ya. Masih kebagian tentang kualitatif. Alhamdulillah. Okay, baik. Today we're going to have a discussion about qualitative analysis. Next week we're going to have mixed method, dan sekalian mengingatkan seperti yang sudah disampaikan bahwa nanti di bulan November akan ada workshop. USM will be conducted a workshop by Dr. Mages as well about mixed method. Ya, jadi untuk dari UPI, perwakilan dari UPI yang mau mendaftarkan diri, kita koordinasi bareng-bareng untuk kemudian mendaftar bersama ke USM ya. Nanti bisa hubungi saya untuk itu. Sedikit iklan dulu ya for advertisement dulu Dokter. Just to remind ya about the workshop.
Right.
Mungkin seperti Dr. Mages, I think without further ado, the time is yours now.
Thank you, Dr. Suzy. Thank you so much to all the participants, and also thank you, Dr. Hernani, to keeping up with me ya. So dah berapa minggu ke sixth week I suppose. Yeah. So thank you so much, and I hope you are learning as well. No point, I'm just simply saying on my part, I'm not sure how much you have gained. So that's why I would like to see in the workshop. I mean, when after the session finish, after the 8th session finish, maybe we can conduct some sort. Maybe Dr. Suzy will still invite me to see what is the product from the student. I'm very interested to see how you have gained the knowledge, and maybe some sort of proposal or something from you all. I'm very happy to see that. Okay. Okay. So last week, we have talked about, I have introduced qualitative research, right? I compared qualitative research and quantitative research. What are the different? Then I talked about a little bit, I touched on the philosophy of qualitative research. So I hope by now you already have a very strong understanding how the philosophy differs between quali and quanti. So if you just to refresh your thinking back, so quantitative is more of confirmatory, where you need to you already some people have done the study somewhere else. You get the idea from the literature. So you try whether the same idea works in your own context. So that means you are just confirming. You're just confirming whether the thing works or not. So it's more for description purpose. You can use this as a basic and also for applied research. Okay. But qualitative, on the contrary, it's more towards emerging. What emerge from your own context? From your study, from investigating your students, from investigating the teachers or the stakeholders of education, what actually are you coming up, what your community says about the research, whatever that you are doing. Okay. Okay, so it's more like a emerging, so it's very subjective in nature. Okay, it's very subjective in nature. So I hope you are very clear about that perspective. So if you are very clear about that perspective, what I'm going to talk today will be very informative for you. Okay, so if confirmatory in nature, we just use numbers, we just use some statistical analysis, we just compare pre-test and post-test, and we get the finding. So the researcher is very much already tuned. You know, you already have some thoughts in your mind. You know what you are looking for. You know you are looking for attitude. You know you're looking for understanding, and you want to make sure the treatment works or not, pre and post test. You know, you have something in your mind. So you just use the statistical analysis, the number informs you. But for the qualitative perspective of research, you don't have anything in your mind. No, I would say that you don't have any understanding, any picture in your mind. So you are approaching with a totally a blank mind to the data. So you get your data, now you don't know how to look at it. You know, so quantitative, you already have an idea in your mind. I'm looking at attitude. But in qualitative, you have a whole list of data, but you totally don't have any idea on what perspective you're going to look at the data. So it's totally open. So this kind of analysis is, I presume, is more difficult than the quantitative analysis. Quantitative analysis, you can have the statistical knowledge, you can do the analysis. But qualitative analysis is actually by experience. Maybe at the first stage, probably you would not get the idea, but when you do the research analysis a few times, you will get how to go about it. So today I will give you some example on what my students have done. And also first I will talk about what is qualitative analysis, how to do qualitative analysis. Then I will share some examples on what my students have done. Okay, so let me share the PowerPoint first. Hold on, let me. Can you see the PowerPoint?
Okay, yes, very
Yeah.
clear.
Okay, qualitative.
Yes,
Yeah, qualitative data analysis. So let's see what I'm going to talk about today. So qualitative data analysis is more, as I said just now, it's more of identification, examining the data, and interpreting the patterns of teams. So you have a whole lot of data. Now you need to explore. You know, you have to put yourself into the data. You must immerse yourself into the data, and then you need to identify what are the patterns. You know, how the patterns appears. So from the patterns, what kind of themes that you can actually identify. So you see, you already have a research question. Okay, you already have the research question. So now, why are you looking at the data? You are actually finding answers for the research question. Am I right? You're looking for an answer for the research question. So the answer is inside. You have, let's say you have a pail of water. The pail is filled with water, and you have to find the answer inside. You know, you have to pick the right thing. So in order to pick the right thing, you have to immerse yourself inside the water. Correct? Same thing here. You have a data, you have a whole lot of data. You need to find the answers inside the data. Okay, so in order to find the answers inside the data, you need to examine the data. You need to interpret the data. So you need to make sense of the data. So when when I say make sense of the data, means you need to find a pattern. So when you already find the pattern, you need to justify this is the pattern that I have found, and this pattern answers the research question. Maybe you might have some knowledge about the patterns, some knowledge, a prior knowledge about the patterns that you have read from the literature, but your data is totally a new set of data. Probably you can use some of the knowledge that you have identified in the literature to see the patterns in your study. But how are we going to do it? I will show you. So in order to find the pattern, or in order how you're going to examine, how you're going to interpret the finding, there is no specific rules. Brown and Clark have suggested something, but even that one also is very loose, very much of context specific. So it all depends on how you're going to do the study, how you're going to do the analysis. I cannot say, okay, you have to first read the data, then how many times you're going to read the data? Maybe 1 time or 2 times is appropriate, but sometimes you need to read 5 times, 6 times, then only you can see some pattern inside the from the data. So there is no specific rules. It's totally dependent on the researcher. And usually qualitative data analysis we won't do by ourselves. We will have a group of researchers, we combine together and we will do the analysis together. It is very rare that where the researcher alone conduct the analysis. Then it will raise the issue of validity, whether the analysis is valid or not. Okay. So usually a group of people will involve in the analysis, and probably we will find the what you call that inter-rater reliability, because when we have many people involved in the research, we can't simply say agree to another person or agree to teacher A or agree to researcher A. We have to have an inter-rater reliability, and we compare the analysis performed by researcher 1, researcher 2, researcher 3, then we make we come to a conclusion what will be the best finding from the analysis. Okay, so it is like I cannot simply say, okay, step 1 is this, step 2 is this, step 2, step 3 is so on. The way you do the analysis, it keep changing, So when I collect the data, I would probably already start to do the analysis. While collecting the data, I already start to know what I'm going to do, I can see some emerging finding, at that point itself, I could see some kind of finding. And then I might not straight go to data analysis. I collect more data. So there is no a specific strategy saying step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. You can actually start from step 4 and then go to step 1. You do the analysis and you go back to the data collection. After collecting data, you do the analysis. Then you repeat back the collection. You make a conclusion. You feel like the conclusion is not strong. You need more data. Then you go back collecting data. So it is like it's a fluid process. That means there's no a specific way of doing it. It's all by experience, by reading, what kind of information that you get from your data will let you know what to do in the what will be the next step. But for early researchers like master's level students or PhD students, we cannot simply tell them, okay, you go and do the analysis. It's good we can provide some kind of structure for them, and after a few times of doing this kind of research, they themselves will know how to do a good qualitative data analysis. Okay, right. Okay, so you see the reason why we want to analyze the data. Okay, our intention is to find the pattern or common theme. Kita nak cari pattern ataupun theme that can answer the research question. You see, for both quanti and quali, we have a research question. How we answer the research question for quanti? We look at the mean value. or we look at the probability. P is less than 0.005 or P is more than 0.05, we reject or we accept the hypothesis. So that answers the research question. But in the qualitative data, we don't have such things. We have so huge data, we find patterns. The patterns or the themes answer the question. Okay, so when you have a very depth data, you want to find the theme. Certain question must be going on in your mind. Okay, so the first question will be, what are the emerging patterns? So it is quite impossible to simply think about a pattern. So definitely reading literature is very important. The literature will tell you what you want or what you can expect from the data. It won't give a total idea, but it will give some sort of a shade, because the data is totally open now. So when you see the data, you don't know what you are looking for. So literature will give you some points to look for. Okay, so when you look at the pattern, first you already get one. Let's say you get a flow. You already find a flow in your data. You also need to know what are the deviation from the pattern. You already got flow, but then you also will find some deviation from the pattern. So the interview data or the observation data not always will follow the pattern or the flow that you have identified. There will be some kind of deviation. So you also need to note what are the deviation. Okay, and from the pattern, from the flow that you have identified, and from the deviation from the flow, what kind of story that you can make? How can you merge all these things? How can you merge the flow, and how can you merge the how can you combine the flow and the deviation, and you make a story out of it? How can you make sense of it? Story here is making sense. So this sense you need to tell the reader. The people who are reading your thesis or your paper, you need to tell the reader. So the reader, the person who reads the work, must agree with what you are saying. So if the person says, no, I don't think the way you have identified the pattern is appropriate, or your justification that you have given for the pattern is not really strong, so I can question the pattern. So probably what the pattern that you have said you identified from your data is incorrect, or maybe there is a loophole that you might need to make the pattern stronger. So maybe you have the pattern, you have the deviating data, the information which deviates from the pattern, but the justification or your reasoning there is not, it's not making sense for the person who reads. But as a qualitative researcher, you can use whatever way to make sense, because qualitative researcher knows the best about their research. Okay. So while the analysis, you already make the story, and then halfway through the question, like, do you need more data to justify the pattern? Do you need more data to justify the pattern, or do you need some other data? Maybe now you are interviewing the students or observing the students, you feel like, oh, okay, I need to talk to the teachers as well. Maybe I need to interview the principal. So do you need that kind of additional data to support the story that you have come up? Or do the finding corresponds with the findings that has been reported in the literature? So is there any connection with whatever the patents corresponds with the literature? So these are the questions that always you have to have in your mind while analyzing the data. Okay, you have to continuously think. You have to, it's not necessary that this is the first question, this is the second question, no, it is not that. It is these are the questions that you always need to ask yourself when actually you are looking into the data. For me, my experience of analyzing interview data, mostly I will be looking at this one. What are the emerging themes? When I have a data, I will try to find what kind of themes that I can actually come up. So like if let's say I'm talking about understanding of rate of reaction, so there are so many literatures on rate of reaction. So I have some thoughts in my mind. Actually, I look into the data with that thoughts. I bring that thoughts into the analysis. Okay, like I'm looking into how students' attitude change with the implementation of a treatment, your intervention. So I know what I can look for in the attitude. So I impose that in my analysis. Okay, I will show you some examples later. Right. So that are the questions. Okay, that are the questions that you must always have with you. You always have to think about the questions that I have said while analyzing. Okay, so just now I mentioned that there's no proper, what you call that, a systematic way of doing qualitative data analysis. So that I wouldn't say this is the way to do a qualitative data analysis. Like if you see in the quantitative, if you are doing MANOVA analysis, okay, step 1, you need to find the descriptive data. Then you need to check the assumption, whether all the meeting all the assumptions or not. Okay, normal distribution, homogeneity of variance, things like that. So that then only you do the multivariate test, then you do the univariate. That is a proper step. But in the qualitative data, there is no what you call that, a series of consequences what to do after one another. But this is the common way of doing it. Okay, a common way of doing it. Okay, so first you collect data. The data can be observation, interviews, document, or any video recording. The next, once you already get your data collection, you need to do data reduction. Okay, data reduction. So during data reduction here is actually finding the pattern, finding the theme, okay, finding the categories. Okay, so data reduction, what you do during data reduction, you select, you select the theme. And then once you identify some excerpts or interview responses corresponds to the whatever your intention is, you try to focus to try to get more information about the pattern that you have identified, simplify, abstracting, and transforming. So that is data reduction. Okay, later I will show you how we have done it. So basically, selection, focusing, simplifying, abstracting, transforming, all these you do simultaneously. Okay, you do simultaneously. So at the end of the data reduction, maybe you will have let's say 5 or 10 pages of qualitative data. 10 pages of qualitative data. After do the data reduction, you already find a flow or theme, a pattern. You might reduce the data into a 1-page data or a 1.5-page data. Okay, because you already bring them closer, and you have prepared a concise, focused data. Okay, in order for you to bring the focus or bring the data in a concise manner, you need to select an important component of the data. You need to focus what is important. You need to simplify. You need to do abstracting and transforming the data. The transforming here is usually we have theme, that we have excerpts. Excerpts is interview responses, raw data. From the raw data, we will identify codes. The codes will be merged as a category, you know, and then as a team. Okay, so codes, raw data, which is excerpts, we also call it as excerpts. From the excerpts, we come up with codes. So when you identify the codes, you are already selecting, focusing, simplifying. From the codes, you are coming up with categories. So it's again selecting, focusing, simplifying, abstracting. So the codes will merge. Let's say you got 10 codes. 10 codes, you can merge them into categories. Maybe 10 codes, you merge them into 5 categories. Then these 5 categories later will merge together, become a team. Okay, so the process of merging the codes into the categories and a team is what you will be doing is, while merging, you will be selecting, you will be focusing, you will be simplifying, abstracting, and transforming. So once you have done this, you can display the data. So in order for you to display the data, you can use charts. Normally, I will ask my students to use thematic mapping. We will do a mapping. I'll show you how we did the mapping and so on. So once you do the mapping, you make conclusion. Okay, so the conclusion is the answer for the research question. So when you make the conclusion, you need to justify. So in this justification, while providing justification, you can refer to the literature in whatever area that you are doing. So you can justify why are you making such a conclusion. Okay, so this is a norm. I wouldn't say this is the way. It is a norm how people conduct a qualitative research. Okay, now general steps. Okay, general steps. You should start the data analysis immediately. You cannot like say, okay, I'm going to leave the data analysis. I have collected the data. I'm going to do the analysis 2 weeks later. Because qualitative data analysis, it's not only about what students have said in the interview responses, the bodily movement, the how their face expression, the movement of the body, it also makes sense for some people when they analyze the data. Okay, I have a student who worked on gesture, and students are understanding about gesture and understanding of corrosion in chemistry. So this student actually looked into how teachers showing various gesture, and that actually encourages students building mental structure of corrosion, you know. So that in that study, she really have to not only the utterances, the responses of the students, but she also have to look into how the students, you know, move their hands when they describe, okay, electron moves from cathode to anode, what happens in the anode in the form of hand gesturing. Okay, and also the face expression, right? So you have to do it immediately in order to get an accurate analysis. Okay, now while you do the data collection, as I mentioned just now, you are actually already beginning the analysis. So you are already starting to find the pattern, you know, while you are interviewing. So that's why we always have a prompting question. If the student say, okay, if the student says like, okay, water, for corrosion to happen, water is necessary. Without water, corrosion won't take place. So you wouldn't stop there. As a researcher, you won't stop there. You might trigger the question, why water is important? Then you might say, oh, water will be reduced to oxygen. So oxygen is corrosion is ferrum oxide. So ferrum will react with oxygen to form ferrum oxide. So we need oxygen in order corrosion to happen. So the oxygen comes from the water. So you don't simply stop at the point there, okay, water is necessary. You don't do that, but you trigger more, you trigger more, you trigger more. Why? Because you already know, you have these thoughts. Okay, in order for students to understand corrosion, first thing they need to know what are the prerequisite for corrosion to happen, or need to have ferrum, need to have oxygen. Okay, so if where the oxygen can come from, this kind of thought you already have in you as a researcher. So you want to know more, whether the pattern appears in the student's mind or not. So you keep asking them question few times until you feel satisfied, until you as a teacher, you are okay, I think I can stop now, because the student have actually given me the answer what I want. So the analysis begin while the data collection is taking place. Not necessary you compile everything, complete the data collection, then you start the analysis. It's okay. That is what I mean. That's not wrong, but you already have a picture about what to do next, in your mind while collecting the data, and this is very important for qualitative analysis. That's why people when I do qualitative analysis, I don't use software. It's very common people use what you call that, Atlas and Vivo for data analysis, but I'm not saying it's wrong, and you can do it. It's good. It's a good software, but I don't prefer using software for qualitative analysis. The only reason is when I did qualitative, when I first time exposed to qualitative data analysis, I was working with some people from the UK, the US, and Canada. So these people, when they do qualitative analysis, they are more into not only the utterances, how the students react, what is the facial expression, what kind of gesture they show while giving that kind of answer. So if you want to look the holistic perspective, definitely Atlas, TI, and Vivo won't give you this kind of I mean, you can't see all this in the Atlas analysis and all that. So I prefer doing analysis manually, looking at the video, looking at the answer, the memo. Every time when I'm doing a qualitative interview observation, I take memos. That memos are very, very important, because that memos will inform me what I can look for in the team's kind of pattern or theme that I can look for in the data. Okay, so the data reduction. Data reduction is you look for, as I mentioned earlier, it is you need to reduce the data, because not all the data are meaningful. Okay, you need to reduce the data. So if you are already analyzing that, you are already start to think about the pattern while you're collecting the data reduction process will be easier. You can just remove all the unnecessary data, and then you just focus on what actually you want. Okay, right. So data reduction will lead you to the pattern or themes. Okay, data reduction process will lead you to the pattern, the next step. Okay, right. So so actually we are I'm talking so many things here. Yeah, you need to reduce data, you need to do this, but actually the gist of qualitative analysis is identifying pattern. That is the gist. That why are you doing a qualitative analysis? You want to identify a pattern, that's all. But in order for you to identify the pattern, you have to go through all these things. You have to, during the analysis, during data collection, you need to think about what kind of data you need to collect, and continuously changing the data, continuously changing the participant, and so on. And then data reduction, then identify a meaningful pattern. So when you identify the meaningful pattern, when data reduction already reduced the data, in identifying the meaningful pattern, you will find the connection between the data which you have reduced. Just now you have reduced it, but there is no connection. But in saying the patterns, in identifying the pattern, you will find the connection. How are you going to find the connection? There are many ways. Two primary ways is content analysis and thematic analysis. Okay, content analysis and thematic analysis. I will talk very detailed on this content analysis and thematic analysis. But for me as a researcher, whether I'm doing content analysis or thematic analysis, I still follow the same procedure. You know, the process is almost the same. So once you have your data, your pattern, then you display, as I said. So then you make conclusion and verification. Okay, right. Now, so whichever way that you are using, it doesn't matter whether you're using Brown and Clark's approach or any other people's approach. This is the general trend or general perspective that you can impose to analyze your qualitative data. Okay, right. Now, so qualitative data analysis, if you look at refresh back last week's lecture, the week before that, I talked about different type of qualitative research. I talk about narrative, grounded theory, phenomenology, and ethnography. So these are 4 different types of qualitative research. You know, like in the quantitative, we have research design, we have survey, we have experimental, we have correlation, so that are research design in quantitative research. But in qualitative, I expose or I inform you the 4 main research approaches, which are narrative, grounded theory, ethnography, and phenomenology. So I give a very detailed explanation about all these approaches. Okay, now, and I hope you still can remember the differences. Okay, the differences how the approaches are different. So in grounded theory, the main intention of grounded theory research is to coming up with a new theory. Okay, coming up with a new theory. Narrative research is more of making story, coming up with stories, connecting stories and making sense of the story. Ethnography, as I said, is more of analyzing the culture, one culture. Phenomenology, as I said, it is about investigating or exploring a phenomena or a specific phenomena like climate change, disaster risk, and all that, right? So these are the 4 different types of research approach that I mentioned last week. So in these approaches, you can use different tools to collect data. You can use observation, you can use interview, you can use document analysis. These are the 3 things: interview, document analysis, video. Video is another approach. Okay, so you can collect data using all these tools. Okay, now you already have the data you want to analyze. So grounded theory analysis will be little bit different than the narrative analysis, then the content analysis, and the discourse analysis. I will go deeper on this thing. One thing that I want to let you know is, it doesn't matter whether it is narrative, phenomenology, ethnography, or grounded theory, whatever it is, the general steps that I have mentioned earlier is applied. in the qualitative analysis. It doesn't matter whether what kind of approach you are doing, but the general steps that I have mentioned earlier, it will be applied. Only thing is the way it is applied in the grounded theory, narrative analysis, discourse, content, it's a bit different. Okay, you will realize that discourse analysis happens in the narrative. Discourse analysis also takes place in the what you call that ethnographic or phenomenology. So the way it happens, it's still the way you analyze all these things. It still follows the 5 steps, not the 5 steps, the general steps that I have mentioned. Okay, now we go deeper into each one. Okay, so the main feature of grounded theory is coming up with the new theory. Okay, it's coming up with the new theory. So the primary criteria of grounded theory is that you cannot analyze the data after. It is quite impossible, not to say cannot. It does not usually happens. Okay, you have to analyze the data while you doing the research. So while you collecting the data analysis already begins. So this is very important for the grounded theory. But you need to do what you call that, identify the pattern. You need to do the data reduction. You need to come up with some kind of mapping, draw, display, and then you need to confirm. So this structure is still there. So the difference is you have to focus on coming up with the new theory while you are collecting data. So that means you already must start thinking about how you're going to structure the qualitative data. You know, so that is the primary criteria of grounded theory, and it is very flexible method. You know, it's a very flexible method. Okay, right. So maybe you might begin the data collection. Like for example, I have published one paper in International Journal of Qualitative Research where I've used the grounded theory approach. Later I can share the paper with you all also. So in that paper, if you see, what we did was we want to come up with a new theory describing disaster risk reduction in one of the area in a province in Philippines. So this is my work with my student. So this student is from Philippines. So he want to come up with a new theory describing how people can be taught on disaster risk reduction education. So we want to teach the students on disaster risk reduction education. So we want to know how we can design the intervention to teach the students. So for that purpose, we have actually used grounded theory to work to explore how disaster risk is taught currently at the Philippines, and how what are the teachers' knowledge. And in the Philippines, they have many educational officers. So what are, from the perspective of the educational officers, the interview observation went on for about 6 months. First, we get the teachers' data. We are not satisfied. We went and recollect the data. And then we got while interviewing the educational officer, we got many information that makes us to go further and further approaching people in higher positioning. So from there, we actually merge all that finding, and we propose a new theory of how disaster risk reduction should be taught in Philippines, that one province in Philippines. Okay, so it is still the identifying pattern, data reduction, identifying pattern, and making a conclusion or justifying whatever the finding that you get. Okay, right. So that's grounded theory. Another one is content analysis. So Content analysis is mostly we do with the document, pictures, video, audio, or we use content analysis approach. You see, I know even when I first started working on qualitative research or started learning about qualitative research, I had a lot of confusion. I think when you listen to me, if you are early at the early stage of early career researcher, I am quite sure you will also go through this kind of confusion. Just now, the other day, I talk about ethnography. I talk about phenomenology, narrative, and now I'm talking about content analysis. How can I relate them? How the content analysis is different than narrative analysis? Content analysis itself a qualitative research. That kind of thoughts will be in you. But actually, you must remember, whether phenomenology, ethnographic, or narrative, that is a research approach. That is a qualitative research approach. While doing ethnographic study, you will take photos. While doing a phenomenology study, definitely you will take pictures. Maybe you do some video recording. So these are the data. These are the tools that you have used to collect data. So the data is inside the picture. The data is inside the video, in the video as a form of a video. Maybe you do some recording. It is in the audio. So now you need to do the analysis. So the analysis that you will be using is the content analysis. So in order to do the content analysis, you will follow the similar step. The first step will be watching the video, looking at the picture, in immersing yourself, internalizing what the picture says, internalizing what the video says. You have a document, like in Malaysia, we have document standard. So I want to know what the document says. So I will be looking at the document, or trying to understand what the document imposes. Or you have students' responses. We also have open-ended responses from the students. We will look at the responses many times, try to understand the responses. That you immerse yourself. After that, you will try to find a categories. You will find, okay, this one I can group them together. This one I can group them together. Group them. Then you categorize them. After finding the category, I think overall, all the categories, if I merge, it will become a team. So the general steps that I have said, it still implies in the content analysis. I will show you one of my examples where I have done the content analysis. Okay, right. Now, the next one is narrative. Narrative analysis goes together with the ethnographic, phenomenology, or any kind of study. So in a narrative analysis, what happens is you have stories. You record people's view. Let's say you're doing a phenomenology. You recorded people's view, what they tell stories. Let's say in certain part of the area, it has been impacted by flood. So you go and interview people of different age. So a older person will say, oh, I'm staying here for 40 years. 40 years ago, things were different. So he will tell a kind of story. And then you might interview another person in the 20s. In the 20s, this person say, well, okay, we need to do some advancement because we need to get job, factories need to come up, things like that. So the elderly person got some version of story, and the younger person got another version of story. You're going to make sense. You're going to identify the patterns, and then you make a conclusion. Okay, so whatever analysis it is, we still fall back to the 5 steps as I mentioned earlier. Okay, I think you are very clear about the 5 steps. I hope so. Okay, discourse analysis. Discourse analysis is also a part of what you call that, the qualitative research approach, the 4 qualitative research approach. This happens within the qualitative approach. That means you are observing how two people are communicating. Okay, you are looking into how people communicating. So you are trying to make sense of the communication that is happening between two people or a group of people, not necessarily two people. Okay, so while observing, it's not merely about observing alone. It's not merely about what they are saying, their utterances. It's also about the kind of language they use. Okay, the kind of language they use. What are the words that using? The words when used in different tone, that has the word brings different meaning. I think you will agree with me. When the certain words used in a different tone, the words will carry different meaning. Okay, so discourse analysis, sometimes they call it discursive analysis. Usually you observe people talking. It's not only about what people say, it's also about the social context surrounding the communication that takes place. Okay, so even for the discourse analysis, you still have to follow the general step. You have to think about, okay, what would be the pattern like? What is the pattern in this discourse? Okay, something like this. And what are the deviating ideas that when the people talking? Do I need to observe more people talking? Can I make sense of what they are talking? When I make sense about what they are talking, I'm already having a pattern, or I'm already having a theme. Okay, so discourse analysis takes place within the 4 approaches of qualitative analysis. Document analysis takes place within the 4 approaches of the qualitative research. So you don't get confused. Discourse analysis is a kind of a qualitative research. That is a misconception that people always carry. Thematic analysis is a kind of qualitative research. You know, so don't have this kind of misconception. In a qualitative approach, whether it's a phenomenology, whether it is a ethnography or narrative, you can have combination of discourse analysis, document analysis, thematic analysis, narrative, story analysis. Okay, I think I'm clear up to this point. Okay, let's see the next analysis. The next one is thematic analysis. Thematic analysis is a very popular analysis suggested by Brown and Clark. Okay, now I want to ask a question. If you look at whatever I have said just now, from the second slide or third slide onwards, before until the discourse analysis, I have mentioned and I have highlighted that the same approach, the same steps that you should take, regardless whether it is content or what you call that, content or a discourse or narrative or an ordinary interview analysis. I've mentioned almost similar steps, correct? So before 2006, this is how the analysis is done. Okay, this is how the analysis is done. But no one actually said that, okay, this is your first step, this is your second step, this is your third step. No one has actually really presented the analysis in that manner. So in 2006, Brown and Clark, they studied the entire literature. Then they said that, okay, why not we call this as a thematic analysis? So they named the analysis as a thematic analysis, and then they propose a very structured way of doing a qualitative thematic analysis. So from 2006 onwards, you can see that many researchers, many articles, many papers and theses, and so people have been using Brown and Clark's perspective of doing thematic analysis. Okay. In fact, myself, I'm doing all my qualitative research. I use Brown and Clark's thematic analysis. The reason is, you see, earlier if I didn't use Brown and Clark's thematic approach, people can question the validity of my analysis. So to avoid from that kind of question, I try to use an approach which is more structured. Okay, right. Let's look at thematic analysis. Right. Thematic analysis is a foundational method for qualitative analysis. It has been happening from those days, you know. It is the first qualitative method of analysis that researchers should know. You as a qualitative researcher, you should know about the thematic approach. And this thematic analysis, it actually provides the skills necessary for doing a qualitative analysis. So what are the skills? It's very simple. The skill that you need to know is the way to identify the pattern, the way to identify the theme. So the moment you have that skill, so you wouldn't face any problem with this with qualitative data analysis. Okay, but as I said, there is no clear acceptance on how thematic analysis should be. There is no a proper agreement. People have not agreed. This is the way how to do a qualitative analysis. This is the way what this is thematic analysis. You know, there is no a proper standard way of saying, okay, thematic analysis is such. So the earlier researchers have poorly branded thematic analysis according to the way they want to do. You know, so as I said, qualitative analysis is very flexible, so you can do whichever way you want. You know, so it's actually whatever I mentioned. They are thematic analysis, but because they are poorly branded, we cannot say that, oh, this is the way to do thematic analysis. Okay, right. So what Brown and Clark they did, they worked on thematic analysis. Then they tried to come up with more specific steps to do a thematic analysis. So, so there are many understanding about thematic analysis. Some say it is a shared generic skills. You know, when we want to come up with a theme, it is actually a few shared generic skills. So this is, I wouldn't say this is a wrong statement. It's a correct statement. Actually, what are you doing? You are actually doing a process step by step, and then you are using certain skills to identify the theme. And so another person said it's not a specific method, but as a tool to use across different methods. Probably it's correct, because we are doing the same thing in the content analysis. We are doing the same thing in the discourse analysis. We are doing the same thing in a narrative, you know, and we are doing the same thing in the interview analysis. So it might not be a specific method. It's more like a tool. Maybe he's correct. Another person said, oh, it is a process performed. It's not a tool, it's not a method, it's a process. But Brown and Clark argued that thematic analysis should be considered as a method of analysis. Okay, so there are many views of what is the meaning of thematic analysis. But we will stick to Brown and Clark's idea that thematic analysis is a method of analysis. Right. Until here, do you all understand what I'm saying? Okay. So my intention is you have to see how the thing evolves. You know, from the beginning, people are already talking about, okay, you need to watch your data. You need to understand your data. Once you understand, you already can find some kind of theme. Then you need to reduce the data. Then you come out with the team, proper team. Then you do the mapping. Then you report, you write the conclusion. That is the general thing. Okay. Brown and Clark said, I am going to come up with the proper steps in order for you to do the analysis. And these steps are called as thematic analysis. So when this idea of thematic analysis came up, there are many different perspectives about thematic analysis. Some say it's a generic skill. Yes, it's a generic skill. We are not going to say it's wrong. Some say it's a specific method. It's not a method, it's a tool. Data analysis tool. Maybe it's correct. It's a process. Yeah, the steps that you have taken is the process. But Brown and Clark said it is a method. Okay, it is a method of data analyzing. So let's see what is the method. Okay, now before I go into the method, qualitative and thematic analysis approach, I would like to introduce two ways of adapting thematic analysis. One is deductive approach, another one is inductive approach. Deductive approach means you already know what you are looking for. Like for example, I want to explore students' attitude towards learning chemistry. I already know what is the meaning of attitude. Chung 2011 presented attitude towards learning chemistry as 4 perspectives: behavioral, cognitive, affective. I can't remember another one. So there are 4 perspectives. So when I approach the data with predetermined idea. You know, so I look for behavioral perspective. I look for cognitive perspective. I look for affective perspective in the data. So that means I already have some idea, then I look for that kind of data. So deductive approach. Another approach is inductive approach. You do not have any idea. No, you totally do not have any idea. So inductive approach, you just looking at the data, you are making sense of the data, and you are actually making conclusion what the data means. So qualitative research, I wouldn't say totally there's no totally it's a kind of the finding is emerging. When you use deductive approach, you have some guidance from the literature. Okay, your understanding is guided by the literature. So you can do the analysis in a more faster manner and so on. But inductive research, it doesn't work in that way. You have to really spend time to make sense of the inductive approach. I'll show you some examples later. Okay, so Brown and Clark proposes 6 phases of reflective thematic analysis. Some people say it's phase, some people say it's method, it's steps. So whatever you want to use it, it's not a problem. So the first step is familiarization of the data. The second is generating initial codes. Third, searching and constructing teams, revising teams, defining and naming the teams, and producing reports. So if you look at what Brown and Clark says, it overlaps with what the other earlier researchers have done. It is the same thing. But the earlier researchers did not provide a concrete way of doing it. They just simply, okay, do this, do that. That's why I named that as a general step. But Brown and Clark proposed 6 phases of reflexive thematic analysis. So if you follow this way of doing a qualitative research, you won't have much problem. So there is a lot of confusion because many people have done qualitative research in many ways, and they are not wrong. They are okay. They are correct. We can follow their way of doing research. But progressively, Brown and Clark has suggested more concrete way or more explicit way of doing the qualitative analysis. Okay, right. Now let's see on the first step. Now, familiarizing yourself with the data. So what happens, and important thing when I'm explaining about this qualitative analysis, Brown and Clark's perspective, keep in your mind that the analysis is not done by a single person. The analysis always happens in a group. Okay, qualitative analysis is quite impossible for you to do individually. It always happens in a group. So the group involves many people, maybe expert in chemistry, or if you're doing something on science, the content expert, the method expert, maybe some people, if you're doing a discursive analysis, some people who have knowledge on the what you call that, the language, the facial expression, the gesture. Maybe you want to involve psychologists, so it's a group of people will be engaged in doing the analysis. Okay, so the first step is familiarizing the data. So you have the interview data, you already transcribe the data. So once you transcribe, you read the data repeatedly. So you immerse yourself inside the data. You become familiar, the data become familiar with you. You become very familiar with the data. You know the depth of the data, you know the breadth of the content. So how to know this? Repeated reading of the data. Another way is, usually what happens is, like, I have come across people where I totally disagree with this way of doing. They will do the recording, and then they will convert the recording to MP3 ke MP4. Lepas tu, they hire the RA to do the transcription, research assistant. I hire my research assistant. Okay, whatever in the video, you translate into in a transcript. You transcribe. If that is the way, how can you as a researcher understand the emotion that went on during the interview, or how can you relate the real situation that you experience while you collecting the data with the transcription that takes place? So actually that is very common. Many people does in that way, but it's not a right way to do. When you do the transcription, you have to do yourself. As a researcher, you have to do yourself, so that you can actually relate the situation when you collected the data, how the student reacted. When asking this question, they were saying like they are very excited. Some students were not so happy. All that thing you should recall when you do the transcription of the data. So that is very important. And then also, while you do the recording, you might have taken some notes, memo. You have in your diary, you have taken down notes, memo. That won't be inside the recording, but you have noted it. So while transcribing, you have to listen or watch your recorded video or audio, reflect on what happened at that day, and also take a look at the memo that you have noted down, or the diary you have noted down. So all these things you need to include during the transcription of the data. So this is called familiarization, familiarizing yourself with data. Okay, immerse yourself. This one won't happen at one go. So you need to do it repetitively look at the data at least for 2 to 3 weeks, try to understand what is happening. Okay, so that's the first step. So when you do it with a group of people, you will start discussing. Okay, for me, I see this is the perspective. Then you talk to another colleague of you, I'm seeing a different perspective. You know, there's a kind of discussion goes on. Okay, this is the first step, familiarization of the data. So it's not only about reading, it's also about transcribing, getting to know what the data is. Second is generating initial codes. So now you already have the raw data. Now you want to come up with the codes. Okay. Now, what are codes? The most basic segment or element of the raw data or information that can be assessed in a meaningful way regarding the phenomena. So they are the data, the raw data is huge. From the raw data, you already identify certain excerpts of the student, which is very much closely related with what you want to find out. So these are called as codes. Okay, so the codes can be data driven or theory driven. If it is data driven, it's inductive. If it is theory driven, predetermined, it is deductive. Okay, now I will show an example. So one of my students, what she did, she want to explore the current context of teaching and learning in chemistry laboratory. Okay, she want to explore how teaching and learning happens in chemistry laboratory. So this is a data driven because there is no any predetermined idea about what will happen in the chemistry laboratory. So it is totally data driven. So now she's going to identify the codes, right? She already, with a group of people, we already have internalized the data. We have read through the data many times, and finally we are coming up with initial codes. Like one example of the initial code is like still teacher centered, as they still wait for briefing from the lecturer. The manuals are prepared for them, which make them think less. So this is exactly the excerpt from I think this is the student's response. So this is what the student have said. So from here, I can come up with a code, teacher-centered learning. What is happening in the chemistry laboratory is teacher-centered learning. Like for example, I can see. Okay, can you all see this slide? I try to make bigger, but this is the best I could do. Yeah. When I go even bigger, it runs out of the specification. Right. So one student said, interview excerpt, teacher-centered, still teacher-centered. This is the one just now I read. So teacher-centered laboratory activities. I coded this response to teacher-centered laboratory activities. Another student said, in my opinion, currently used method may not be so effective because at times they seem to be doing for the sake of doing, and sometimes they don't really know what they are actually doing. So this is the student saying, about what is happening in the laboratory. The method is not so effective. They are doing this for the sake of doing. Sometimes they don't, students simply follow procedure. They don't know what they're doing also. So this is actually I coded for effectiveness of the method use. Can you all understand? Right. Then another student, we could have more like cooperative learning, discussion, students coming up with their own procedures, because students should be more involved and take charge of their learning. So they are suggesting proposed other teaching methods. Okay, so this is the interview we conducted with a group of teachers and also students. We want to know what is the current teaching going on, teaching and learning that takes place in the chemistry laboratory. So this is at the matriculation level. So we conducted interview with teachers and students. From the responses, so this is totally data driven. We don't have any idea. So this is totally data driven. So from the data, we make sense of what can we interpret. So the first level is familiarization. We already familiarized. After familiarization is the second level is coming up with the initial code. So from the responses that as given, we come up with the initial code. So teacher-centered laboratory, effectiveness of method use, proposed. Some of them are suggesting, why not use cooperative learning? Why not do more discussion? Why not engage students more in the learning? Okay, right. We shall continue. So this is another one. Sorry. Teacher-centered laboratory activity. So this is a response from another student or teacher, I'm not sure. Okay, students, teacher. Okay, right, let me see. Overall, it is still teacher-centered. The pre-lab, time depends on the teacher due to inability to relate between the chemical concept to be tested in the experiment. So teacher will guide the students to link between concept by using pre-lab activities. Experiment time is maybe student-centered. Teacher facilitates students while conducting the experiment. Post-lab, most of the time, it is teacher-centered due to time constraint. So we will discuss experiment results with students, ensure details. So the entire thing, what I can make sense is teacher-centered. Okay, this is also about effectiveness of method. So what I am trying to say is, whatever I'm showing here is exactly what are the interview responses, the transcripts. Okay, so that's why you see the language also haywire. They didn't really use a proper language, So based after do the transcription, we made sense. We come up with the initial code. So later when I share the slide with you, you can actually see how from the responses we come up with the codes. Okay, so this is our only initial codes. Maybe we need to revise the code later. Okay, right. So right now from the codes we have several codes. We have find out several codes like teacher-centered laboratory activity, effectiveness of teacher-centered, proposed laboratory. So these codes actually we merge these codes reflects on the sub-team teaching method. Okay, so we have also other codes. We have also identified other codes like activities promoting critical thinking and creative thinking. So we merge these codes as thinking skills. Working in groups, connection of laboratory with the theory class, material environment, open-endedness. We merge all these as learning environment. Participation of students, dependency of students, aims of the students, all these are students' attitude. So what I'm trying to say is the intention of this interview is to identify, to explore the current context of teaching and learning in the chemistry laboratory. Okay, we want to explore how teaching and learning in the chemistry laboratory take place. From the interview responses, we come up with certain codes. So the codes are teacher-centered laboratory activities, effectiveness of method, proposed laboratory teaching. So these are the codes. Similarly, when we analyze, we had several codes. It's not only about the teaching, we also have codes that shows activities promoting critical and creative. We have codes like working in groups, connection of laboratory. We have codes on participation. So what we did, we merged the codes on teaching, and we name them as we collate the codes on teaching and we give the name as teaching method. So we group the one with the critical and creative thinking, we name them as thinking skill. Working in groups, learning environment. This whole codes learning environment, and this one as a student's attitude. So do you understand? So from the initial code, we are comprising the codes to form a team. You can call it as a category, you can call it as a team, you can call it as sub-team. We are naming it as a sub-team because later we will merge all the sub-team to become a team. I can also name this as a category, no problem. Codes will be merged into categories, but my students, they want to name it as sub-teams. So it's not an issue. They are the same. I'm merging, then later the sub-teams will be merged into a single team. So now what I want to see, I want you all to see is, so the aim is to explore the current context of teaching and learning in the chemistry laboratory. So we have huge interview data. From the interview data, we identify many codes. For example, this excerpt, this response from the student is coded as teacher-centered laboratory. This one as effective method. This one proposed method. So similarly, this is the same thing. And when we compile the entire interview data, this is what we get. So what we did, the one related with teaching, which is teacher-centered effectiveness and proposed teaching method, we combine this and we name it as a teaching method. The one got to do with the critical thinking, creative thinking, it's a thinking skill. All these things are learning environment, and these are students' attitude. Okay, so from the initial code, we also merge the codes to propose a team. So now I can say that the chemistry laboratory teaching and learning can be explained using 4 teams, 4 sub-teams, which is method, skills, environment, and attitude. Right. Now, okay, I think I made a mistake. Okay, right. Okay, so I think I should show you this. Okay, so once I have come up with the sub-teams, I merge all the teams. Now I need to merge all the teams so that it makes sense. So the team that I have merged is current context of teaching and learning in the chemistry laboratory. This team is supported by 4 sub-teams. Sub-team 1, which is teaching method. Sub-team 2, which is thinking skill. Sub-team 3 is the learning environment. Sub-team 4 is the attitude. And then if you see here, the sub-team 1, teaching method, we have the codes, which I've shown you just now. The sub-team 2, we have these codes, activities promoting. Sub-team 3, we have learning environment. They have their codes, and sub-team 4, it has this specific code. So we have merged all these things and we have come out with a thematic map. Do you understand what I'm saying? How to come up with a thematic map? Okay, this is one example. So, you see here, what I have mentioned just now, I have done the familiarization of the data. I have generated initial codes. I have searched and constructing themes, and I have revised the themes and defining and naming the themes. So I cannot do all this process separately. All this process happens simultaneously. It happens together. I generate the theme, At the same time, I try to search and construct. I generate the codes. At the same time, I try to search and construct a team. And while constructing the team, it doesn't happen like that. First time I made mistake. Then I revise back. What should I name it? Shall I name it as a teaching approach? You know, that kind of thought discussion, many discussion. After that, I revised the team again. Then finally, we define and name the team. We come to agreement what will be the final team. And then we produce the report. So the mapping that I produce is the final display of the analysis. So I cannot explain to you separately because all these things happens simultaneously at once. You generate code, you name you construct the team. Then you revise back again. And then you revise back again until you come to the final defining and naming the teams. And then you produce reports. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, Dr. Mages.
Okay, right. Now, let me show you another one. Okay, so the big research here, this is one research, my PhD students research. I'm showing you here. So the big research here is the student want to explore the current context of teaching and learning in the chemistry laboratory. So when she explored the teaching and learning, she identified several sub-teams, right? Several sub-teams. So the sub-teams, as I said, is teaching method, thinking skill, learning environment, and students' attitude. So if you look at the diagram, the display just now, the thematic map that I showed you, now she knows that the laboratory teaching and learning, chemistry laboratory teaching and learning is explained by the teaching method, thinking skill, learning environment, and students' attitude. So that is the big picture of the research. So this is a PhD thesis. So now she want to know how the teaching method is reflected. She want to go deeper. How the thinking skill is reflected. How the learning environment is reflected. How the students' attitude is reflected. So she's going deeper. So now let's see the thinking skill. Now, for the thinking skill, how shall I say? So these are the interview responses and the code. So for example, you can say the critical thinking, creative thinking, because these skills are not designed to be tested during practical lessons. So this coded for activities promoting critical thinking. In my opinion, current teaching and learning in the laboratory limits students' critical thinking. So it's so explicit that they really need some kind of activities for promoting critical thinking. So students have to go beyond what do they know in order to develop their critical thinking. So all these excerpts here explicitly shows that promoting, they need something to promote critical thinking. Okay, they need a kind of activity to promote critical thinking. So what she did now, she want to do further investigation on the critical thinking. Okay, so let's see. Okay, from analyzing the interview responses on the critical thinking, so she did a further investigation on identifying the kind of critical thinking that really happens in the classroom. So from the analysis, she come up with the codes. I'm not giving the excerpt here. I'm straight going to the codes. She come up with a code like assumption made, assumption not made, argument strong, argument weak, degree of truth or falsity, conclusion follows, conclusion does not follow. So she make codes. She categorized from the responses on the critical thinking. She find ways to merge the responses into this kind of codes. Okay, now you must understand. Just now, when she was doing the exploring teaching and learning chemistry laboratory, it was data driven. It was totally data driven. She tried to make sense of what's happening in the chemistry laboratory. But now she is already theory driven, because recognizing assumption, evaluate arguments, draw conclusions are constructs of critical thinking proposed in the literature. Okay, these are critical thinking, component of critical thinking proposed in the literature. So in the literature, it is said that recognizing assumption is assumption made or assumption not made. So whether the student making assumption or the students not making assumption. Evaluate argument is whether the argument is strong or the argument is weak. Drawing conclusion is degree of truth. So when come to the section on deeper on critical thinking, she already following theory driven, which is deductive way of analysis. So in the qualitative analysis, deductive, inductive, deductive, inductive, it happens simultaneously, it happens together. That's why it's very difficult to separate them and explain to them. Even I want to explain to you, I really have to think how I can put it in a way, in a very simple way that you can understand. So that's why I use this thesis. So exploring teaching and learning is data driven, is inductive. So from exploration, she identified few themes, sub themes, and now she's going deeper, critical thinking. So critical thinking is a deductive A analysis. So she identified quotes, she identified the excerpts, the interview responses, which can grouped as assumption made and assumption not made, which implies the recognized assumption. Okay, right. Now, so how can I say this? Right. So you can see here, there are several subteams. Subteam 1, which is recognized assumption. So this is assumption made and not made. Subteam 3, draw conclusion. She has infer, deduce, interpret. So these are the subteam, and then the codes. This is what we have derived from the interview responses. Collectively, we have merged and then we produce as a subteam 3. And then the subteam 2, which has the code of argument strong and argument weak. So collectively, we presented the thematic map that explains the critical thinking skills of students as this. Can you all get what I'm trying to say? Right. So coming up to this stage it's tedious. It's very, very difficult compared to quantitative analysis, which you can just simply put the data and you make sense. This is a tedious work. Okay, right. Now, I will go for another example. Let's see.
Excuse me, Dr. Mages, can I ask a question?
Yep.
Yeah, could you please go back to the thematic diagram?
This one?
Did the students generate this diagram with software or draw manually?
Draw manually.
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 Yeah, I saw some paper using NVivo or Atlas software. They can generate themes diagram like this. So your students use manual.
Yes.
This. I see.
Because that's why I said, as I said, I don't prefer using the softwares. It's not wrong. I mean, you can always use the software, but I believe that in doing a qualitative data analysis, your emotions are involved. You cannot separate your emotion from the analysis. What you experience when you you collect the data, how the students responded when they answer to your question. You know, all these are very important in qualitative analysis. When you use the software, you are actually translating the transcript into the software, correct? And then the software gives you the analysis. If that's the way, how are you going to integrate all the emotions, you know, the experience that you encounter? All these are part of qualitative research. So I believe in that. That's why all my students under my supervision, they do manual analysis. I encourage them to do manual analysis. So when they do manual analysis, they really can go deeper and deeper and deeper. Many things you can actually see in the analysis. So that's why from the excerpts, you come up with the codes. How you come up with the codes? You look into the interview data many times. If you put inside the machine, you transcribe, you put inside the machine, it will also give you the codes. But I'm not sure whether the codes will be similar to this or not. Maybe the codes will be different, because these codes are taken into the consideration of the students, the way they reflected. You know, like when the teachers said, some teachers, when they said, okay, chemistry teaching really need to change. Some are very expressive, you know. Some said, we can't do much because it is by the ministry. We don't have the power to do things. You know, some say it that way, so passive. Some are really expressive. They say, no, we have to do things. We need to do that. We need to do this. All this, the system can't catch one. The software cannot catch all this.
Yes.
You know, so that's why, you see, I can talk more and more, you know. You see, when we do the analysis, like in my case, this is a PhD student's work. So they also have some limitation. They have to do it in a certain time frame. They have to complete their study and they have to go back to work. I cannot be telling them to do this, do that. No, this is itself very heavy already. And some of these students did a mixed method. So she has a quanti data somehow, you know. But actually, when you do the analysis, you don't only look at the analyze the utterances, apa yang dia sebut. This is basically the utterances, the sebutan dia. But we also can analyze the gesture. You know, how proactive were the teachers? We also can analyze that. So that will be another section of the analysis. So when you report, when you do the mapping, you merge the gesture analysis and then the utterances analysis. You merge, you come up with the mapping. That will be a more advanced kind of analysis. You know, like my students work on a gesture in a I didn't actually use that because I forgot, you know. So gesture in a what do you call that, in a pengkaratan, how to teach pengaratan dalam using gesture. That's a very informative study. Unfortunately, when you want to publish this kind of work, I have a lot of problem because we are not the only one done a study using gesture. There are so many people have done study using gesture, you know, and how our study is going to be different from them. And this student did in Bahasa Melayu, so I had problem of translating into in English. That is another heavy work of translating, you know. So that's why I forgot actually. If not, I would have taken some examples from there. Okay, right. So let's see another example. Okay, so this is laboratory learning environment. Laboratory learning environment, science laboratory learning environment. So science laboratory learning environment is a construct by Fraser from Australia. He is the person who actually Fraser and I don't know how to pronounce the name, Eldridge, I think. Eldridge, Fraser and Eldridge. And these are the group of people who actually explored the laboratory learning environment. And in fact, they have proposed instrument to measure the laboratory learning environment. So now we want to explore how the science laboratory learning environment, like in our first, the inductive approach, the inductive exploring the teaching and learning, it already shows that the teaching is an issue, critical thinking is the issue, critical or creative thinking skill is the issue. The next one is the laboratory learning environment. So we want to go deeper, how the laboratory learning environment is reflected in the chemistry laboratory. So what we did, we asked question. From the question, you see, learning environment much depends on the pedagogy, where the activities are planned for the student. For example, students working in groups promotes cooperation, working in groups. The code is working in groups. The material in the labs are mostly available. Sometimes they are shortage, also where the students need to share. So material, lacking of material. Experiments conducted does not relate with the theory, but at times they do not work in parallel, where sometimes the practical comes first before the theory, and so it is a connection between the laboratory and theory. The term students lack getting the opportunity to design, so we don't really allow them to design or plan. We do the planning, we give them the recipe like procedure, they just follow the procedure. So this is open-endedness. This is a deductive. This is a deductive because our analysis is already guided by the predetermined codes by Fraser and Eldridge. Like thinking skill is also a predetermined code on the thinking skill from the literature. So this is also a predetermined code from Fraser and Eldridge. Okay, right. So hold on. So okay, so these are the sub teams that we have created. Students know laboratory exercise emphasize open-ended, laboratory activities are integrated, behavior in the laboratory. So we merged into several teams. So these teams are actually the teams proposed by Fraser. So it's a deductive approach. Okay, right. So for the mapping, you can see the mapping. Okay, you see the mapping here. So chemistry laboratory learning environment, it has a team 1, which is student cohesiveness, sub-team and code. Okay, right. So here, if you see, we have code, sub-team and team 1. If you see here, we have codes, sub-team, okay, and these sub-teams directly merge with the team, correct? So we have 3 sub-teams merge into a team. But in this case, we have codes, sub-team, team 1. So we have several teams, team 1, team 2, team 2, team 3, team 4, team 5. We have several teams, and all these teams merge into a single team, which is chemistry laboratory learning environment. Now, why we did it this way? Because it's actually nothing wrong. I can actually, from sub-team, I can go straight to team 1. Team, I can name them as sub-team 1, sub-team 2, sub-team 3, and so on. And then I group them as a laboratory learning environment. But we didn't do that way because from the code, we have one level of merging. So the codes that actually shows students know, students help each other, students are supporting each other, we group all these answers together, we name them as sub-team. And this sub-team actually corresponds to the team 1, which is students' cohesiveness, which is reflected from Fraser and Eldridge work. So that's why we suggested to have a sub-team, team 1. Similarly here, laboratory activities emphasize openness. All these are sub-teams, but we didn't go straight to the team because we want to indicate that it corresponds to the team open-endedness from the Fraser and Eldridge. That is the only reason. Actually, you no need to do that also. You can actually directly link. We can do it that way. Right? So this is the thematic map that reflects on the chemistry laboratory learning environment. So if you can see here, one inductive study which talked about chemistry teaching laboratory, teaching and learning laboratory. Then from that inductive study, we got to know, oh, thinking skill is one issue, learning environment is another issue. So thinking skill, we did a deductive approach. Learning environment, we used a deductive approach. So it stands as a whole qualitative approach. So in coming up with this, as I said, these processes are not done separately, they are done simultaneously. We work and work and work. We work backward, we come forward, we work backward, and it does not involve one person, it involves a group. But we followed Brown and Clark's 2006 6 phases of reflective thematic analysis. Can you all understand? Okay, so this is how thematic analysis is done, So this could be the reason why sometimes, sometimes why thematic qualitative research is a bit difficult, because we cannot simply say do this, do this, do this. We cannot say. We have to really work in a cycle. We have to work in the cycle, repeat the cycle many times. So I try my best to say something because initially it's very difficult to segregate the words, segregate the work, but I try my best to say something. So what we did was, in searching the teams, we have the code, we merge the code together. Okay, and then from merging the code, so we have lecturer's code, we have students interview. So it's not only from the lecturer's interview, we also have students interview. So we look at the students interview responses, we look at the lecturer's interview responses, we identified the code. The codes are then merged into several subteams. So these are the subteams, as I showed you later. And then the subteams are again revised, restructured until we came to a coherent pattern. We came to the agreement. All the participants in that research group came to the agreement on the teams and subteams. Okay, right. Now, so I think I have done with the content analysis. Do you thematic analysis? Do you have any question on that before I can go into content analysis?
Is there any questions, students? Well, Dr. Mages, I have a question. Bu Hernani, can I ask the question to Dr. Mages? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's good to know that you did work like similar with, or I think this work using SLAE, Science Laboratory Environment Inventory, if I'm not mistaken, managed by or developed by Barry Fraser and Jill Eldridge. And I just want to confirm that they already developed the very valid instruments, about SLAE, about Science Laboratory. But as you mentioned that you did the research in Malaysian context and using Bahasa Melayu as well. When you translated the instrument into the Bahasa, do you also did a kind of factor analysis before you do before you use the instrument, or you just use the instrument as it is?
Okay. I did the validation because the SLEI, the instrument, actually previously someone have used that instrument in measuring Malaysian context, students laboratory learning environment in Malaysia. So that person, the past research actually documented the questionnaire is reliable and all that, and that person have actually done the what do you call that, factor analysis.
Oh, okay.
So since I already have the factor analysis finding, and also SLEI is a very established instrument,
Yes.
so I just did validation, face validity, and also I just did the alpha Krumbang, the reliability, and I performed the research. I think factor validation is not necessary in my case, because for two reasons. First, there's somebody have done factor analysis in Malaysian context, and second thing, in using, actually in this we had mixed method. This is a mixed method study. We also have a quantitative part section of the research. So when I want to measure the laboratory learning environment, I solely based on SLEI. I didn't use many instruments to come up with the item. So because I'm just using one instrument, SLEI, and this instrument is a very established instrument, so I think factor analysis is not necessary. As long as I can get the alpha Krumbang, reliability, internal consistency, and also I do validity in terms of content, in terms of language, looking into the appropriateness of the item. That is good enough.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And also it is interesting that you also do a deeper research with this kind of instrument by using mixed method, because usually Barry Fraser and Geo Aldrich only use the quantitative research, if I'm not mistaken. But your student do it in mixed method and deeper analysis with a qualitative one. And I also I just wondering, where is the theme that is merged from segregate the codes that you already show us, the theme looks like similar with the scales in the SLEI instrument. So my question is, if we have a very established instrument, we can come up with the similar theme with the scale. The theme will be similar with the scale. But how can we make sure that the theme is emerged from the data analysis, the thematic analysis? It is not really influenced by the scale originally from the instrument.
Okay.
Or is it okay if we just use the theme so that we can, like, when we do the analysis, our analysis, so the codes, we can guide the codes into the theme.
Okay, let me answer your question, Dr. Suzy. Okay, so as I said, this is a deductive analysis. So deductive analysis means we already have a predetermined codes.
Okay.
So when I want to look for, like, for example, students' cohesiveness, I already have in my mind. I want to look for students' cohesiveness. So students' cohesiveness means, based on reading the article or work of Fraser, I know students' cohesiveness means students supporting each other, helping each other, knowing each other. This is what is the definition given by Fraser. So I take that definition and then I look into my data, and I try to find whether there is any elements from the interview responses that actually reflects on students' cohesiveness. So if I can detect anything that's said by the students reflect on students' cohesiveness, I will quote that as a I will code it, yes, under the, okay, let's say in the lab, students work in group. The lab activity is conducted in such a way that they help each other. Maybe one student will initiate the question, another student or another group of students will try to find responses to the question, then they will discuss among them. So let's say they have some kind of response, something like this, they responded. Then I can code it as a under the sub-team helping each other. Under the sub-team, the learning is supported by each other. So this grouped into a team, student cohesiveness. So if you see here, the refer to table and the codes. I'm not sure whether I have the table or not. Let me see whether I have the table. Okay. You see the codes here, work cooperatively. So from the responses, we can actually see the responses shows that the students work together, get to know each other. So they in the responses we can identify that they are knowing each other, helping each other, depending each other, supporting each other, getting along well. So all these things goes under the sub-team. Students knowing, help, and are supportive of one another, which is the team cohesiveness. So these are the quotes. We have excerpts, what the students say. So these excerpts, I can actually group them together and say, these are the excerpts that reflects work cooperatively. Same thing, laboratory activity, open-endedness. Okay, so some responses of the students I can imply: pursue own chemistry interest, opportunity to design, do some own experimenting. Students collected different data, decide the way. So from the responses given, this is what I can come up. I understand this is what the student or teacher want to say. So this collate to the open-endedness, directly relevant with the team open-endedness. So definitely what the student says is not, it's not a mirror, echoes exact wording of Fraser, but the idea of Fraser is in the students' responses. That's what we are saying.
Yeah. So if we do it in a deductive way, so we can generate the codes, yeah.
Yeah.
We can determine the codes.
Yes.
We analyze.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
So the deductive way of analysis is always easier than the inductive way.
Yeah, you're right. Because in inductive way, we have to start from the scratch, and we have to change the code, not the codes. Yes, sometimes one data, one exception can have two codes.
Yeah. So that's why I don't know. We cannot do qualitative data analysis individually. There always must be a group of people involved.
Yeah.
Because different people make sense in a different way. So maybe when I read the students' wording, I will interpret it in different way, but my friend interpreted in different way. So we need to come to an agreement. So that's very important for qualitative research. So.
And also when we use the en vivo, we also have to determine the codes by ourselves.
Yeah.
So there's also the thing that we have to, we do it with en vivo, but what we do is exactly similar with what we did it in manual. So that's the thing. I also didn't use en vivo again.
Yeah, I actually not additional work. I feel like we are doing the work 2 times.
Yeah, but later on when we generate the themes, I think we can get helpful, yeah. But the most yang paling banyak menyita waktu, the most pekerjaan paling banyak itu di coding.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Maggie.
Right.
Continue to the content.
So that's why even the research that's why I said it's a student research. they are just looking at the interview, they are just looking at the document analysis, they're just looking at one single factor. When you do a qualitative analysis, the best is to look at multiple, especially in the discourse analysis, or sometimes we call it discursive analysis. It's not only about what student says. You see, I suggest you go and read up more on all these things. I have an interface here. The interface is my screen, correct? So when I talk, I'm referring to my interface. I'm pointing to the screen. I have certain points to make. So even the interface is actually a data. You can actually analyze it. And then how you reacting as a presenter, how I'm reacting to the interface. This is also a kind of qualitative data, which you can actually can analyze in your writing. So in qualitative, you just don't look at the interview alone, or you don't look at the document alone. Many factors comes in collectively together. Okay, right. I have few more minutes. Let me settle with the document analysis. Content analysis. Now, content analysis, don't get confused. Some people say thematic analysis also a kind of content analysis. They are not wrong. Okay, they are not wrong. Thematic analysis can be a content analysis. Content analysis can be a thematic analysis. But I just want to share with you how different the advocates of content analysis presents content analysis. That's all. You can also take a document. Okay, you can do a photo or any pictures or anything. You can follow exactly the 6 steps of thematic analysis by Brown and Clark, and you can do the content analysis. It's also okay. It's no harm. It's a kind of thematic analysis anyway. Okay, but I just want to show you another way of doing content analysis. So content analysis, usually what happens is you have your document or picture. Usually deals with document. Okay, content analysis usually deals with document. The document can be any kind of form. Students work, what you call that, students open-ended responses. Let's say they write an essay. It also can be a document. Okay, so what you need to do, you again have to do the coding. You have to do the you have to generate the code. You need to come up with the categories, and you have to come up with the theme. So exactly the same. Only thing is, in the coding, we try to use diagrams, pictures, and we try to label the what you call that, the document, using different dimension, different approaches, different ways. I will show you some example. So Bankston said that there are 4 stages: decontextualization, recontextualization, categorization, and compilation. Decontextualization is similar to the first few steps, which is getting familiar with the data, coding, initial coding, and then search for the theme. It is decontextualization. Once you decontextualize, you recontextualize. That means you redo the process. You identify you reread again, you look at the document again, you internalize the document again, you find the codes, you find the themes. You repeat this thing many times. So it is almost similar with thematic analysis. Then you do the categorization, which is the theme making the themes, and compile. I'll show you some example. So this one I think you can read yourself. Okay. Now, I have a students open-ended responses. Okay, students open-ended responses. So I want to categorize the students open-ended responses. I want to categorize them into 5 different elements. According to Holmes, students' understanding in chemistry is reflected when they are able to transfer. They must exhibit the ability to transfer. The depth, that means kedalaman. Jawapan yang dia beri itu mesti ada kedalaman, depth. They should be able to predict or explain. They should be able to solve problem. So this is four categories of understanding in chemistry. If you say you are measuring students' understanding in chemistry, these are the four elements that the students should exhibit in their answer, in the responses, open-ended responses. This categorization is by wholes. So normally, content analysis uses deductive analysis. Okay, uses deductive analysis. So the subcategory is application of knowledge concept in a given context, deeper level of graphs of ideas, theories, ability to predict, demonstrate problem solving, codes to apply knowledge, concept of endothermic, arrange. So these are the codes that we actually identify from the students' responses. So these codes actually, when we merge the codes, we can say that the students able to apply knowledge in a given context. The codes here we merge that we say that the students have a deeper level grasp of ideas. The codes, the ability to explain and all that, we merge that to the subcategory of ability to explain. So this is parallel with the predict and explain. So now I will show you the real data. Now you see here, this is the responses of the student. Okay, so from these responses, student correctly mentioned the temperature of solution decreases as the reaction absorbs heat and vice versa. They understanding of the system and surrounding. Correctly applied the concept of exothermic and endothermic. So from the answer here, endothermic reaction, the temperature of the mixed solution decrease as the heat energy is absorbed during the reaction. So the answer here shows that they correctly apply the concept of exothermic and endothermic. So this answer corroborates with the first thing, which is transfer, which is the category of application of knowledge in a given context. Let's see another one. So this is similar. Student accurately mentioned the reaction absorbing heat from the solution. So this is about the transfer. Let's see the next one. Student correctly suggested the change in the concentration of sulfur dioxide and SO2Cl2. Okay, so this shows that the depthness. They know in depth about change in the concentration and also the kind of concentration of both reactant and the product. So this reaction also shows that they understand, they know in depth about change in the concentration will affect the reactant and the product. So this implies the second, deeper level grasp of ideas and theory. That is not in memorization. So they didn't memorize, but from the reaction, they know when there is shift in the equilibrium, there is a change in the product and the reactant. So ability to explain. You see the student, a good response given by students that showed the explanation based on the given figure clearly. So they have a figure explaining the activation energy, and then they elaborate the figure very clearly. So this is the ability to explain. Okay, so same goes here. They have the procedure. This is not the this is the next one, which is problem solving. So here you can see that they have this experiment. They presented the finding in the form of data in the table in which they have exhibited the principle of problem solving, in which they say that students clearly understand the procedures and identify the analyte and titrant and tabulated the answer correctly. So that means they exhibited the problem solving ability. So this analysis is very much deductive, because what is the meaning of transfer is given by Holmes. If I can see the meaning of transfer in the student's answer, I can say that the students are exhibiting transfer, the ability to transfer. You understand? So it's very much of deductive. I'll show you another one. Right, you see here, this is because I screenshot the answers. So now we want to see the ability of the students to use multi modes. That means multiple modes of representation, MMR. So how the student use the modes effectively. So we are using a content analysis. This is a student's response. Okay. So we use content analysis from the framework of Brian. Brian have proposed MMR, multiple modes of representation. So he mentioned that if the modes are used appropriately, the modes must have assignment expectation, audience consideration. So what is the meaning of assignment expectation? Covered the concept of ionization energy of iron is higher than expected. Accurate definition of ionization energy, completeness of meaning. So this is the explanation of definition of assignment expectation. Then we can see that the whole things are happening in students' answer. The student have given equation is a kind of mode. The students have given accurate definition of science concept, which is part of the assignment expectation. And then the students have exhibit in their answers completeness of meaning. So in the answer, they have various modes. One is equation, another one is a diagram, notation. We call this as notation. And also they have words. In their answer, they have combined the diagram, combined the notation, and combined the words and explain it accurately. So yeah, I have given the explanation here. This paper is published in SERP, so you can actually get to know more details about this in SERP. And I also have a few book chapters in SERP. So the document analysis is very much guided by deductive approach. So these are the document analysis of students' answer. So I can actually share more things, but I'm just worried it will drag further. So for example, here we have identified key terms, accurate science concepts. So if you see, all these definition will match with the definition given by the Brian. So this is content analysis. So it's not actually different from thematic analysis. You still have to follow the familiarization. You still have to identify the themes. You still have to go through the themes many times. And then you have to present the theme in the form of mapping. So we present the theme as such. But these students, they have used recontextualization, decontextualization, and conceptualization of content analysis, a different approach than thematic mapping. Okay, so this is the whole process of qualitative analysis. I tried my best to show as clear as possible, but it is very difficult because the process, it happens simultaneously. It is not like I can specifically say, oh, to check the assumption, you do this. To do the univariate analysis, you can do this. But in qualitative, we cannot do that. We have to, mingle in the data. Okay, So I think I'm done for today's lecture. You can ask questions if you have.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Mages. We still have like 13 minutes. 30 minutes to 12. So if you already have questions, you can ask the question to Dr. Mages about the analysis of qualitative research. Ayo, Iklima, Bu Dini. Bu Hermani. Enggak? Barangkali ada pertanyaan.
Thank you, Bu Tusi. Dr. Mages, istilah iterator and validator, what difference of in qualitative research? Iterator and validator.
Okay, iterator reliability, okay, and validator. Actually, they are the same. They are not much difference. In quantitative, we use the word validating the research, right? But then in the qualitative, we use iterator reliability. That means, as I said just now, we have many people involved in the research analysis. We have to make sure we are coming to an agreement, right? We are coming to an agreement, and there is no vast differences between the analysis performed. So I might have performed in a different way, and a friend of mine would have performed in a different way. But then we have to come to an agreement that the outcome of analysis is almost similar. So we need to tell the person who reads our work, we have ensured that the iterator reliability or validity is maintained. So what is iterator reliability? We can actually measure using Cohen kappa's value. So we create a form. We checked on the teams that we have produced. Like maybe next week I can show you an example on how we have actually checked on the iterator reliability. So we create a checklist, and then we use a Likert scale 1 to 5. Okay, the rater 1 have read the transcripts 10 times. Yeah, so I give scale 5. The rated 1 understands the transcript well, so maybe I give a scale of 4. So there are few checklist items that we can create. Then once we have collected the data, we have to analyze using SPSS, and then we can identify the Cohen kappa value. So the value of 0.6 and above, it shows that you have a reliable inter-rater reliability. I can show you that next week. So validation is mostly on the quantitative part of the study.
Yeah.
Okay, I
Bu
think last
Tusi,
week,
please
yeah.
translate for me about content analysis. Biasanya kan kita menganalisis dari buku misalnya Bu Tusi ya. Kemudian hasil analisis kita sebagai contoh misalnya dari buku teks itu, apakah ada aspek-aspek nature of science, tidak gitu ya. Kemudian peneliti memberikan deskripsinya bahwa notes-nya itu ada di bagian ini. Kemudian kita memvalidasi ke dosen ahli gitu. Itu berlaku nggak ya di kualitatif gitu?
Ya, yang itu adalah satu kajian qualitative content analysis. So di sini saya bagi assignment expectation kan. So mungkin dalam kajian itu adalah nature of science. So nature of science mungkin ada sedikit penerangan apa maksud nature of science, and then gambaran dalam buku teks tersebut. Di mana agaknya elemen-elemen nature of science itu boleh di identify. So it's a kind of qualitative content analysis. Yeah.
Yeah. Ya, selanjutnya itu biasanya di istilahnya divalidasikan ke ahli, ke dosen yang lebih apa ya, lebih spesifik ilmunya gitu, Bu Tusi. Bisa nggak ya? Itu iterator atau validator ya?
Itu
Ya.
iterator.
Iterator ya? Oh iya.
Iterator. Actually,
Ya.
kalau nak guna validator pun tak salah. Okey, boleh guna lagi. Tapi iterator lebih sesuai. Sebab beberapa orang akan melakukan analisis tersebut. So kita nak dapatkan satu persetujuan. Kita nak dapatkan satu persetujuan. So kita akan cek researcher 1, researcher 2, researcher 3 dan kita come to an agreement. So kita kena dapatkan cohort value 0.6 and above. So kalau sebegitu, itu menunjukkan iterator reliability itu agak baik. So kalau iterator reliability tak bagus, bermaksud 5 orang buat analisis, 5 orang buat 5 cara yang berlainan. So dia tidak ada satu persetujuan. Itulah maksud dia. Kalau nak tengok validity apa? Content validity, face validity, dia macam kurang sesuai. Sebab yang itu lebih kepada quantitative analysis.
Okay, clear. Thank you, Dr. Mages.
Yeah, and then also last week I think I talked about the trustworthiness. Trustworthiness itu pun seperti validity juga. Tapi yang itu lebih kepada data itu boleh di-generalize atau tidak. Transferability, for example, is one kind of validity. Confirmability is a kind of validity. Itu lebih kepada dapatan. Tapi yang ini iterator reliability ini lebih kepada analisis. Kena nampak beza dia. Yang itu outcome tu kita nak generalize. So itu transferability in the qualitative research. How can you confirm the finding is from your study? It's confirmability. Last week I discussed about that. Correct? So itu adalah lebih kepada finding. Tapi iterator reliability, always remember, iterator reliability adalah lebih kepada analisis. Rating the analysis. So this is an important, like yang ini satu saja, kan? Itu satu data, dokumen saja. Tapi in most cases also, we have document, we have interview, we have so many other things. So there should be a iterator reliability among all these. Dia mesti ada satu persetujuan. Kita tak boleh buat video separate, interview lain. Kita kena ada satu persetujuan. Yang itu pun disebut iterator reliability.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Right.
Ya, jadi tidak perlu pakai translator ya Bu Hernani. Tuh, semuanya Dr. Mages juga bisa bahasa Indonesia. Don't worry. Ya.
Ada benda yang saya tak faham, macam yang dosen tu saya tak berapa.
Dosen itu lecturer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah,
karena kedudukan iteratornya berbeda. Misalnya mahasiswa dengan dosen lecturer.
Ya.
Lecturer.
Ya.
Student and lecturer, dan itu disamakan jadi iterator gitu.
Ya.
Ya,
yang itu lebih baik sebab kita ada beberapa kumpulan berbeza, dari student, dari lecturer, dari orang yang berbagai jenis. Yang itu lebih baik. Kalau guna lecturer saja mungkin data tu ditengok dari perspektif lecturer saja. Tapi kalau kita ada ramai berbagai orang, berbagai bidang, yang itu akan jadi lebih baik. So macam ni kan kes saya ni. Saya ada chemistry educator, saya ada orang yang arif dalam multi-mode representation, and then people who are quite well versed dalam bahasa. So ada berbagai. Yang itu lebih baik.
Okay.
Oh ya, oke. Terima kasih banyak Dr. Mages. Ya, ini we got several participants ya. Atanda Hamid, Adeniran Ibrahim, welcome to our course ya. They are the alumni of virtual summer school of chemistry education this year ya. I just wondering where does this student comes knows ya how they can know the link. So yeah, because the department also share the links into the alumni of summer school. Okay. Yeah, is there any other question? We still have 3 more minutes.
I really hope end of this session, end of this entire visiting professor session, we can come up collaboratively some product, maybe a writing article or some kind of as we can say as the outcome of the collaboration, you know. So maybe your students are doing some work, as you said, you have the research fellows, right? The summer schools. So probably we can do something and we can really produce an outcome out of the talk.
Yeah, I think we have to discuss about the topic itself, yeah, Dr. Mages.
Yeah, that's why, Dr. Suzy, I'm thinking, you see, it's all up to you. It's just crossed in my mind. We have talked very detailed about quantitative research and we have talked very detailed about qualitative research. So I don't know to what extent students have absorbed whatever we have said. So from what you mentioned, the students are master's level students, right? Master's students, right? Going for a mixed method, I think will be very heavy for them. I can introduce mixed method to them. No harm. But maybe it will be more benefiting if the student can come up with some idea and then they share the idea and we discuss of the possibilities of whether they're going to use quanti, they're going to use quali, whether the idea is researchable. That will actually give them a more concrete way of doing research. I don't know. This is what I thought of, you know, whether they would be able to absorb the mixed method. I can give one lecture on the mixed method, no problem. So I don't know from your part what you are thinking.
Ya, Bu Herani, bagaimana? Jadi karena memang sangat mendalam ya. About mixed methodnya. Jadi dan Dr. Mages ingin waktu lebih banyak untuk bisa berdiskusi dengan mahasiswa terkait mengenai riset yang akan mereka lakukan nanti, gitu Dr. Mages ya?
Ya. So mungkin saya boleh tahu lebih, boleh guide mereka atau bagi tunjuk ajar macam mana mereka boleh gunakan kuanti ke kuali ke mixed method pun tak ada masalah. Saya boleh bagi tunjuk ajar, tapi sebelum pergi ke mixed method saya kena dapatkan satu gambaran bagaimana agaknya mereka dah buat satu perancangan, you know. So that will be very good. If not, they listen. Benda ni bukan senang, ini kompleks, you know. So I don't know, probably how they can actually they can come up with the idea, present ke, you know, then we can give feedback or something like that.
Ya gitu Bu Herani. Nanti mungkin kita rancang untuk pertemuan, presentasikan rancangan penelitiannya gitu ya. Sangat bagus sekali Bu Dr. Mages ya. Sebetulnya kita tidak mau banyak merepotkan Dr. Mages untuk juga mengarahkan mahasiswa, tapi ya kita sangat senang Dr. Mages juga punya concern terhadap itu, alhamdulillah. Jadi mudah-mudahan kita juga bisa belajar banyak ya, mahasiswa semuanya ya, bisa belajar lebih personal lagi nanti ke Dr. Mages terkait dengan penelitiannya. Mungkin nanti kita rancang lagi di pertemuan berikutnya.
Bu Susi, mungkin bisa disampaikan ke Dr. Mages mengenai payung-payung penelitian atau KBK kita yang biasanya cenderung atau secara garis besar kebanyakan itu biasanya pengembangan Dr. Mages, product oriented.
Product oriented. That's why you see, so product oriented means experimental design. Usually experimental design, correct? So mungkin kita boleh fokus kepada itu, experimental design, and then we can guide the student on how to conduct research on experimental design. You know, rather than kita cakap banyak, then I don't know to what extent they already absorb. You know, we can make it more focused. And at the same time, if I feel like I don't know, maybe I can give one.
How about development research, Dr. Mages?
Apa dia?
Development research.
Saya tak faham apa dia.
R&D.
Okay.
Research and development or development research?
Oh, development research. Development research also it uses mixed quanti and quali. The fundamental is quanti and quali. Now I'm thinking, now the students going to do the research, right? So we would like to see how they are going to formulate the research problem, how they're going to use the research question, how they're going to come up with the hypothesis and research question, how they're going to use quantitative or qualitative analysis to do the research. That is important, I think, for the students. You know, so this is what I'm thinking. Maybe you can discuss later and let me know what actually you want. You know, so if the student can give some idea, present what they want to do, I can give feedback so they can work from there onwards. Yeah. So I have another 2 more slots with you. I'm thinking, I don't know, maybe you can discuss if I can give mixed method, no problem. But I'm thinking, what is the point if they do not know how to use it? Because these are master's level students, you know. I can introduce the mixed method, no harm. So all my research students, they do mixed method. I encourage them to do, because the problem is in science education or chemistry education, we cannot simply, especially people like us where we are competing with the the first world people, they don't really like much of quantitative data. They prefer to have qualitative finding from the third world countries. So for that purpose, I always like to mix the research using both the methods. You know, so I can show 1 or 2 examples on mixed method research. Like next week, maybe I go deeper on how my students used mixed method to conduct their research. I can show 1 or 2 example, but no harm I can show. But I would like to see more from your side how the students have actually employed or take the ideas to conduct the research.
Ya, oke Bu Herani, Dr. Mages. Oke, thank you very much. Ya, Dr.
Okay.
It's really great that you also have a concern, yeah, about our students' type of research. That's really great, actually. Oke, ya Bu Herani, nanti mungkin kita jadwalkan ya untuk itu. Jadi untuk pekan depan bagaimana Bu Herani? Apakah masih atau bagaimana?
Kita harus midterm dulu ya. Harus midterm dulu, mungkin minggu ke-9 ya. Awal Oktober, awal November.
Okay, yeah. There's also a request from Bu Monica. Please introduce the mixed method to us. I'm really looking forward to.
Okay, no problem. I can conduct 1 lecture. Maybe next week I will introduce method. Okay, minggu ke-7 kan, minggu ke-7. Okay, I will try to introduce mixed method. Maybe for the lecturers it will be useful, other than student.
Okay. Yeah, later on, if you would like to join us in joining the session workshop from Dr. Mages related to mixed method research, Dr. Mages, in 19th and 20th of November.
Yeah, November.
Yeah, Dr. Mages will conduct the workshop in mixed method research. If you would like to join, please join the workshop. Ya. I'll let you know
Butuh tanggal berapa?
19 dan 20 November, Bu.
Flyernya ada, Ibu?
Ada. Saya sampaikan ke Bu Monica.
Baik, siap. Terima kasih, Bu.
Ajak teman-temannya.
diajak teman-teman.
Okay, so next week I will introduce the mixed method approaches, and I will also talk about the sampling strategy a little bit here and there, and then maybe I will show some examples.
Oke,
Okay.
Oke, mungkin seperti itu dulu ya teman-teman semua, mahasiswa semua, all of the students here. Thank you very much for coming. Especially thank you very much for Dr. Mages.
Thank you.
Abundant knowledge, yeah. You already sent to us, and also the attention and yeah, we really appreciate that you really wants to make sure that we understand and we know how to implement the knowledge, the research method into our own research later on.
Yeah.
Thank you very much once again. Maybe this is the end of the session for today.
Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Oke.
Terima kasih.
Sama-sama Dr. Mages.
Ya, bye-bye.
Ya, terima kasih juga Putri yang sudah menyelenggarakan.
Ya. Bye.
Ya, izin live ya.
Ya.
Oh ya Dr. Mages. Oh, ini masih record.